2018, and this is the first developer session of the second day. I hope you're all excited to see some excellent Total War Three Kingdoms. So please give a big round of applause for the lovely Al Bickham from Creative Assembly.
Thank you very much, Matt. Right, yes, today we are here, of course, to talk about Total War Three Kingdoms. And sorry, just get my stuff in a row. And yeah, basically, our next big historical game, obviously set in ancient China. And one of the particular aspects of Chinese history that we found super fascinating and is actually something we've taken into the game and we're actually building our kind of core systems around. So every time we embark on and start exploring the era that it represents, we find a lot of inspiration at the time. And ancient China, of course, is no exception. And if you've any familiarity with past Total War games, which I imagine some of you probably do, you'll have noticed we build a whole series of interactions between different gameplay systems at the heart of the game. And at a really basic level, this is about players finding useful solutions to very specific problems they face in the game in order to strength to win the game. So just looking at it on a systems level. So a very simple example of this is you think of your starting army in a Total War game, and it's early on in a campaign, and you're fielding some very common spearmen in your starting army. These guys are unshielded, and they're all very good at running up stuff and poking it with pointy sticks, but the problem is you find them getting shot to pieces by archers on the way in, so they get torn to ribbons every time you can't charge them. So this is where our kind of Venn diagrams of system designs comes into play. So you pull back to the campaign layer of the game, and you glance over your faction's tech tree, and you find a technology that unlocks, say, a new industrial building which crafts shields. So with this building in play, you can now start recruiting upgraded spearmen who, as they carry their hefty new shields into battle, are protected from arrows. So your spearmen become more survivable, and because there are more left in the unit when they charge, you win more engagements, and therefore you win more battles, and the snowball grows. So meanwhile, you discover other synergies between other systems in other parts of the game, leading to other improvements for your faction. So not just in your armies, but your economy, in trade, and a whole host of other parts of the game. And that's, as I say, a very basic example of system interaction, but interactions such as this involving conflicts and synergies are fundamental to our design, to the design of Total War, and to the series as a whole, really. So let's move on to the Wu Jing. And this is what's really different for Three Kingdoms. So as soon as you start researching ancient China, you quite quickly discover how fundamental the philosophy of the Wu Jing is to Chinese culture. And essentially what it is a school of thought which uses the movement and relationships of these five kind of core elements in the world, it's a way of describing how the world works. And it's been used for millennia to assign cause and effect to pretty much every area of human experience. So that includes like medicine, morality, politics, cosmology, war, obviously, as well. And writings from as far back as 2400 BC reference Wu Jing thought, but it was really unified and formalized on paper by the Han Dynasty, which is the kind of period our game is set in. So the term Wu Jing literally means 5 phases, referring to these elements. And they're dynamic, they're interactive, they constantly shift from one form to another, hence why they're generally referred to as elemental phases rather than just static elements. And it's a way to view the events of the world in a constant state of flux. And quite early on in Three Kingdoms development, we realized how elegantly this philosophy aligns with how we approach our systems design. So each of the 5 phases can represent something tangible and relative in nature. So let's take another obvious example. Let's take the changing seasons. In the ancient Chinese calendar, there were 5 seasons. So wood represents spring, the time of growth. Fire is summer, the season of flowering and energy. Earth represents a sort of transitional late summer, early autumn period, a time of increasing moisture and fruition and growth. Metal represents autumn, the time of plowshares and the harvest. And water represents winter, the time when the silos are stocked and the fields lie fallow, until we go around the cycle and we come back to spring. So the philosophers of ancient China viewed pretty much everything through this lens. So we thought, why can't we do the same? And applying the theory to the game is where these interactions between the elemental phases become super important, as each elemental phase naturally supports and feeds another. So wood, of course, feeds fire. Let's get those up. Wood, of course, feeds fire. Fire generates ash and creates earth. Over time, earth bears metal. Metal, in its turn, sheds minerals and enriches the water. And in its turn, water feeds wood, and again, we come full circle in this kind of supportive cycle of generation. We're still at the conceptual stage. We'll get to the game in a second. So each elemental phase is also inherently strong against one other element, and of course weak to another element. And it's capable of overcoming it and transforming it. So we have a sort of conflict system as well. So wood parts the earth as a plough drives a furrow. Earth gathers in river deposits and dams the water. Water, of course, extinguishes fire. Fire, in turn, capable of melting metal. And just as an axe chops down a tree, metal splits wood. So let's apply these elemental interactions to the game, and we'll start at a fairly high level. So the 5 phases, we can map these onto the different sort of classes of society and their functions as well. So I'll demonstrate this using some of the buildings in the game. So wood is the symbol of the peasantry, whose role is agricultural. As you can see, this is a granary building, this is a peasant building. Wood, as we know, feeds fire. So fire is the symbol of the military. So wood feeding fire, the peasantry provide conscripted recruits for the armies. Fire, in turn, generates earth, just as the armed forces enable government to exist and protect that government as well. Government, in its turn, enables infrastructure and industry. And it enables these things to prosper. The prosperity fostered by industry, in turn, enables trade and learning. So we have a schoolhouse here, for example. Excuse me. The scholars and the traders, in their turn, elevate the peasantry as water nourishes wood, and once again, we're back around the supportive cycle, but in a meaningful way for the game. And you'll notice the colouring of these buildings. They are coloured according to the colours of the Xing elemental phases. And when you finally get to play the game next year, you'll see this colour coding throughout, with characters, with units, with every part of the game where we've got systems interacting. You'll see the reflection of those elemental forces. So, as we've discussed, each phase is also strong against another and capable of overcoming it. So, following the red lines of conflict again, the military can destroy industry by burning down the factories, just as fire melts metal. Industry bites into the farmlands, harming agriculture and the people, just as metal chops wood. Peasant uprisings can sweep away government as wood divides earth. Governments, in their turn, embargo trade and crack down on dissent and free thinking, just as earth dams water. And education and trade can, in their turn, avert wars, reducing the need for armed forces and undermining armies, just as water extinguishes fire. So we're going to drill down another level and take a look at how characters, which we're building as the real cornerstone of Three Kingdoms, fit into this worldview. So the qualities and strengths of the elemental phases correlate strongly with the characteristics of our heroes and help define not only their character archetypes, but their ongoing development and their core skill sets as well. So, meet Xiahou Yuan, one of our major heroes and a loyal general to the famous warlord Cao Cao, who is one of the playable faction leaders. Now, we have 5 different character archetypes in the game. Every character falls into one of these categories, and each of them is, as you might have guessed, related to one of the elemental phases of the Xing. So, Xiahou Yuan is a vanguard, a combat-focused hero type whose guiding elemental phase is fire. Vanguards thrive on instinct and live for the second-to-second flow of combat. They're at their very best when they're ranging out ahead of the army, attacking the enemy front lines, causing disruption and mayhem. And of course, they have a strong affiliation with fire elemental units. So shock cavalry, in particular, are fire units. So he's going to, affiliate very well with shock cavalry. So every character has a number of core characteristics defining the bonuses they gain in both campaign and battle, and each of which reflects a phase of the Xing, as you might have guessed. So earth symbolizes authority, metal is expertise, water is cunning, wood is resolve, and fire, of course, represents instinct. So each of these particular characteristics grants different bonuses related to its element. Take instinct, for example. So Zhao Yuan this is his sort of stat line at the beginning of the game, and as you can see, he's got a high instinct rating, which you'd expect. That is, that's the fire element characteristic. It's related to soldier. It's related to fighting. And it's his definitive characteristic, and it will improve as you pour skill points into his Vanguard, his key skill, which is Vanguard. So high instinct does a number of things. It grants buffs to the units under him, for example. So it reduces his unit recruitment costs and the upkeep costs in particular of shock cavalry, who are a fire element unit, as we've said, and improves both the charge speed and charge bonus for all the units in his army. He's, as a sort of legendary, unique character, he also has his own title, his own unique title, Maker of Ways, which grants him further bonuses to shock cavalry. So all this is starting to build a picture, right, built around his core element. You can see how his core characteristic of instinct naturally places him in this vanguard role. He has access to the very best tiers of shock cavalry, which he further improves through the bonuses that he grants them when they appear in his retinue in battle. But of course, no man is one-dimensional, and that's where the rest of a character's skill trees come to play a big part in broadening their skill set. So while a vanguard like Zhao Yuan is naturally going to gain more bonuses to his instinct through skills, as that's his major focus, his skill tree also grants leeway to start improving his other characteristics, say resolve and authority. Now this means that characters, they can broaden the range of their skill set beyond their core focus, introducing and improving new battle and campaign bonuses in a whole host of complementary ways. So the same system works for other character archetypes. So you can see all the character archetypes arranged around the edge there. So the water symbol is the symbol of the strategists, the cunning, educated men, relates to the education buildings as well. And they specialize in recruiting the best archers and improving them via their core water skill, which is cunning, their core water characteristic, which is cunning. And it's important to note that each character archetype can also recruit units outside of their core specialization, right? So a Vanguard, Zhao Yuan can recruit archers, but he won't have access to the elite tier archers that, say, a strategist would, and he certainly can't buff them in the same way that a strategist would with his increasing cunning skill. And you can field up to 3 of these characters and their retinues in a single army, so building a useful army composition is therefore as much a game of planning how to bring 3 complementary characters with the implied bonuses they grant specific units in their retinues into a single force. So a very basic example of a flexible force might consist of Zhao Yuan, say, a fiery vanguard character, fielding shock cavalry to which he grants those lovely instinct-based charge armor, charge speed bonuses. We might choose to bring a champion as well. So champions, their defining symbol is wood. These are the heroes who've risen from the ranks of the common men. They are the heroes of the people, and their forte is really dueling with other heroes. So as a wood-based character, their key characteristic is resolve, which grants bonuses to spearmen and enables recruitment of the highest tier of spearmen. And finally, we might choose to bring a strategist. So these are artful guys. As I've mentioned, their element is water, and they're defined most strongly by the cunning characteristic, which grants a whole host of bonuses to archers and crossbowmen and unlocks new unit formations for the whole army, which is, that's a really core skill for them. So your spearmen and your cavalry may benefit from having a strategist in your army because he can unlock new formations for the whole lot. And of course, as a water character, a cunning character, he utilizes archers much better than anybody else and has access to the sort of highest tier ones. So there you have a sort of fairly balanced and fairly flexible fighting force consisting of infantry, cavalry, and ranged units, each of whom are granted bonuses by their very specialized leaders. So getting the most out of individual units is about having the right characters leading them and granting them skills specific to their unit type. By extension, therefore, getting the most out of any army that you're fielding as a whole is about considering those elemental phases, which character archetypes represent, and bringing particular combinations of them together into a single fighting force. So let's go down one level further into the game and consider battlefield units themselves. So we all know there's this kind of rock, paper, scissors interplay with units in historical warfare, and indeed modern warfare to some extent. So how does that look when we view them through the lens of the Wu Jing? Well, actually, it turns out to be pretty accurate. So let's look at the conflict, because that's what we're all about with soldiers. So the wood symbol spearmen are the perfect counter for charging melee cavalry of Earth, of course. As Earth units, melee cavalry are best at chasing down the fluid, strategic water-based bow units. And that makes sense as Earth dams water. Ranged water units are good at counting lightly armored shock cavalry from a distance, just as water extinguishes fire. Fiery spear cavalry are best at taking down melee infantry, as fire, of course, melts metal. And in turn, metal units like axe and sword infantry will naturally chop through wood units, such as spear and polearm units. Just as the axe fells the tree, of course, and this works right around the wheel, defining which units are strong and weak against which other units. Okay, I'm going to draw it to a close there now, but just to conclude, I really hope this has given you a kind of useful window on how surprisingly useful and accurate the Wu Jing has been for us, like in our core systems design for Total War 3 Kingdoms. We are out in the season of wood next year, which, as you all know, is spring. And we're certainly looking forward to seeing how people are going to kind of spot these sort of elemental interactions within all the systems of the game and really exploit them and, you know, sort of manipulate the game at that fundamental level in a way that the game's hinting you to do with those elements as they're kind of being presented to you. So that's it from me. Thank you all very much for coming. We've got time for a few questions, I think. The microphone of shame has been placed in the center of the room, so if anyone wants to ask a question, then please come up, don't be shy, and do ask a question. Anyone? Oh, we got one. Welcome, sir.
Hello.
Hi.
I was just wondering, could Vanguard, say, change to a commander as the campaign continued? Is that something that could happen?
No, you can't change character type, but what you can do is diversify your character's abilities. So there's all sorts of other little systems that link into characters as well to do with their personality and how they have relationships with other characters in the world, which can give them certain bonuses in battle or in campaign as well. But you can give them ancillaries, you can give them different mounts, you can give them different weapon types, which change their kind of skill set. But fundamentally, if you want to change the approach or pad out a character's kind of abilities, to change the way he does stuff in a way, then it's all about pouring, as they level up, pouring skill points into different parts of the skills tree, which starts increasing those other characteristics and giving them the kind of bonuses that might be enjoyed by, say, a commander. So if you pump a load of points into authority, so if we had Zhao Huiyuan and we were putting a load of points into his authority skill, he'd start enjoying some of those kind of commander-based bonuses. What he wouldn't get access to is that kind of core, that core-based skill that those character archetypes have. So you can push them in different directions, but you can't fundamentally change the role of a character.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Oh, we have one more here.
Do you take a lot of inspiration from Dynasty Warriors, or is it just mainly from the Romance of the Three Kingdoms?
It's chiefly the Romance of the Three Kingdoms. I mean, obviously we look at all different media and how they portray the period and the characters of the period and the events of the period as well. So yeah, we look at things like Dynasty Warriors. If you've never seen Red Cliff, please go and watch it. It's absolutely awesome.
It's a very good film. I highly recommend it.
Very good film, yeah. But principally, it comes from the book itself. It comes from the Romance of the Three Kingdoms. So, and that's where all media, surrounding the Three Kingdoms period kind of springs from, because beyond the records, which were written in the 3rd century, obviously the Romance was written in the 14th century, it transformed, what was history into these kind of almost living legends of characters. And that's still like alive today in video games and movies and comics and everything. So yeah, I would say principally, just to round off, yeah, principally we take our inspiration from the Romance of the Three Kingdoms.
All right, cool.
You mentioned before that you wanted to do 2 different game modes for Three Kingdoms. One more rooted in the fiction, in the detail, and one which is more geared towards realistic conflict.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
The whooshing, do you plan to have the bonuses be more palpable during, say, the fiction campaign, or do you plan to have a more, a little more traditional feeling to the more realistic campaign, where the whooshing may not play as much?
So the main difference really is you still get whooshing kind of inspired bonuses in various areas according to those synergies that you build in the game between systems. You still get those in both the romance mode and the classic kind of historical total war mode as well. The real difference is in those kind of character combat abilities in battle, which will be granted by, you know, leveling up your particular heroes to do particular things really well. So, you know, a Vanguard's going to have a couple of activatable abilities in battle, which are real powerful things. You know, you won't get those in classic mode. Your hero will be a general, and he'll have the same hit points as a normal man, and he'll be surrounded by a bodyguard of units, rather like a traditional total war game. So, all those kind of bonuses they're getting from the skill, you're still going to be putting points into their skill tree. You're still going to be putting points, or rather, you're still going to be looking to enhance their core kind of characteristics and maybe round them out and build other characteristics as well. Because those things, I mean, we chiefly talked about the stuff like how it works in battle here, but those characteristics, authority and cunning and resolve, these characteristics give you bonuses across the campaign as well. So you'll still get those bonuses in classic mode, but you won't see the kind of razzmatazz in combat with characters that you would do in the romance mode.
Thank you.
Okay. Any more for any more? No, I think we're done. Right, that's me done. Thank you very much, everyone.
Big round of applause for Al. Cheers, man. Thanks for coming along and watching this talk on Total War 3 Kingdoms. I hope you enjoyed it. Please do join us again at 1 o'clock, whether you're here in the hall or watching at home on the stream. We've got a great presentation on Disco Elysium, so I hope we'll see you for that. Thanks.